Hi everyone, happy Friday. I figured we would have a live. I have no earrings on. Damn it. I'm not about to get up. We haven't had a live in a while, so I figured we'd have one today and usher in the weekend. I don't know if I never know when it starts. Okay, I think it just started. Wonderful. Hope y'all are doing well and that it's warm where you are. We're getting a cold front here in New York, which is joyous. Not really, because the cold is miserable. I figured that we would do a live on some of the comments from the live stream we did on Wednesday, about prenups, patriarchy, and Potomac. Because some of the comments were really interesting, and at first I thought we would address some of, I don't even want to say negative, people's unwillingness to let go that the majority of us are the rule and not the exception to the rule. However, there were some interesting points raised in some other comments that I thought that it would be really helpful to go through. How are y'all doing? Hey, Urban Chica. Yeah, it's supposed to get down to like 20 degrees here in New York tomorrow, which, gross. So we'll start with this. If you haven't watched the YouTube live, highly recommend. In that live, let me see. Do I have this? I think I have My camera's deciding to show other things. I have no idea what I just put on the screen. I think that's from the Valentine's thing I went to with Chelsea the other day. Let me see. I think it's this. This is the one I want to do. Is it on the screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, it sets it up nice. I was curious to see how it would set it up. So in that live, if you haven't watched it already, hey Charlie, essentially we are discussing the newly social media popular trend of luxury dating, and specifically about Ashley Darby and her prenup. She is on Real Housewives of Potomac, and why you should always negotiate your prenup, and why, yes, I'm a big advocate of marriage with a mutual prenup. It will save you some arguments later in life, unfortunately, if it happens to end. And largely, one of the things I thought was really interesting in this comment that we didn't really talk about, I don't think we talked about it at all in the video, I figured we could talk about now, was this comment from Christina, which her comment, I'm gonna lean in because y'all know I cannot see. The intersection of class and colorism in Real Housewives of Potomac is fascinating. If my memory serves me right, I think Ashley mentioned growing up financially insecure in season 1, which significantly influenced how she partnered as she got older. I think she hoped that her beauty and proximity to whiteness, Ashley, I believe, is a black biracial, would shield her from abandonment and neglect. If that was the case, she may have failed to consider the whims of men, especially men with lots of money and resources, are constantly changing. Beauty and desirability are fleeting, especially for black women, regardless of their complexion. Patriarchy has us thinking there is safety and security in marriage, and there really isn't. Which I thought this was a great comment, and brought up something that is somewhat, I would say, of a misnomer when we have the trifling trifecta conversation without adding the classism aspect to it. So the trifling trifecta being colorism, texturism, featureism, and the higher you are or if you fall more on the scale towards proximity to whiteness, you are afforded more things in life in the United States. That's how this works, unfortunately. Ashley, being a black biracial, light-skinned woman, thin as well, if we're talking about her size, having, I think, she might be like 3B-ish hair. She wears it straight often. Is very much scoring all the way towards like, okay, she should have benefited from all these things. And she largely, being the beneficiary of all these things, thought that would protect her from Michael and his foolishness, which again, it cannot be stated enough times that Michael is 29 years older than her. Has a previous marriage, has had kids in his previous marriage, clearly divorced the first wife, has done this whole rodeo before, and Ashley is nothing new. Ashley was his employee that he decided, oh, okay, well, I love you, I like you, let's try it, etc. But this whole idea of protecting his assets, he already done this thing. And without seeing the class dynamic, which is why I brought up the difference in the live between classism in the UK is very much like people know what class they are. It's discussed, it's dissected, it affects a lot of your life outcomes. And in the US, the way people think of class is very much you have it or you don't. And that's not, we have a whole class caste system in the US as well. And essentially, when you ignore that there's working poor, working class, barely the middle class. I think calling the middle class sometimes is disingenuous, because the middle class are just one paycheck and a more comfortable office away from being working class. But what's left of the middle class, the upper middle class, which upper middle class would be like the law partners at the firm, at a small firm, who have a little bit of money. They might have a second home. I would say second home puts you in upper middle class. And then you have the Bezos, the 1%, who have scammed their way into all this money. So without having that conversation, which now that we read it, I'm going to take it off. Stop sharing. Okay, so having the conversation, looking at Ashley as the person who benefited from colorism, featureism, texturism, etc., and her thinking like, oh, my whole life, people have pedestalized me. They have told me that I was special because I was light, bright, and almost white. And I got all these things. Like, of course, this white man will treat me with dignity, respect, and will give me, if we are to leave after 8 years of marriage, I will get an equitable amount. She didn't take into fact her class at all, and she largely ignored her class standing. And I noticed that because I tried to do some more research into it, I was curious, as somebody who doesn't watch the show, in the fact that she went to college. If you are a working class person that has gone to college, it doesn't guarantee you a direct ticket into the middle class, which is largely why she probably became a bartender and was like, well, I have to work. I have to make sure my bills are paid, etc. And then the class dynamic comes up again with her and Michael in the way people largely expected Michael to elevate Ashley to the aesthetics of an upper class woman. What people assume the rich and the wealthy are doing. Because I noticed in like watching some other videos of them and some comments, and like even going through our comments, people pointing out the fact that Ashley, before they were married, was a Fashion Nova girl. Before we, realized it was fast fashion. And then afterwards, still was a Fashion Nova girl. Which, outside of the fact that it's fast fashion, she technically should have had access to other things that maybe she wanted. And clearly, Michael was like, yeah, that's not for you. And I think largely in terms of most people marry intra-class. So most wealthy people are marrying other wealthy people. So when they are marrying somebody from a different class, particularly in a white man, young black woman dynamic, there is a huge level of fetishization there. And I have seen it firsthand, which is why she, I think, is a good example of this. There is a huge level of fetishization. And I think, to be honest, based on what I've seen, and Ashley is a good example of this, the older white man is not necessarily interested in trying to make his working class, now wife, fit in with the rest of his friends' wives. He's not necessarily interested in being like, oh, hey, let me give you these class signifiers so people stop talking about you crazy. It's a token to him. It's this thing that he's like, oh yeah, see, I'm a man of the people. I'm a normal person. I met Ashley at a bar that I happen to own. And no, that's not important right now. And it's very interesting to look at the class dynamic, and particularly why I said I think a lot of the messaging is harmful, because the messaging is never targeted at upper middle class or upper class women that are born with money. Women that their family has money already, so they, like Candace, for example, or women that have, maybe if they don't have the class standing on their own, they have worked their way into the class standing, or etc. When you have this dynamic, it cements the power imbalance. I think Michael, to be honest, and largely the few people that do this, enjoy the power imbalance. There was no reason for him to renegotiate their prenup and to still dangle the half in front of her. The more I started watching more of it last night to be like, oh, let's have another live. What was the purpose of him saying, okay, 3 years and then you get half? And at the 3-year mark being like, okay, another 5 years and then you get half. Because someone pointed out in the live was like, why would he offer half? If he's the one setting the terms of the prenup, why would he even bother to offer her half? He doesn't have to offer her half. He could offer her, hey, you get the car, we'll do custody with the kids. I'll make sure I pay for their private schooling or whatever they have, etc., etc. Why is the money set at half? And I was like, I think it's just a way to control her, to be honest. It's a power control. It's a power move. And largely when you don't take class into consideration, the differences in class are how we, as society, exert power over other people who have less. So personally, when I went to law school was just a shocking experience, to be honest. I said this a million times. My dad he's alive and well and fine, but he got into his accident, so he doesn't currently work anymore, but was my whole life a truck driver. A truck driver is a working class job, is manual labor, drove a gas truck. It's a dirty job, technically. You get oil on you all the time. And if you do it right, you can get middle class money. But you will never have the aesthetics of middle class. And my dad was very much aware of this. And his biggest threat to me as a kid, which I always thought was like really interesting because I didn't care, was I'm going to show up to school if you get less than an A in my dirty clothes. It was a threat all the time. He's like, I'm going to embarrass you. And I was like, you're not going to embarrass me. I'm not embarrassed of you. This is where we're from. I don't care. Like, I'm not business with you. But he took it because the way people treat working class people as less than. And it was something very cemented into my mind. So when I went to law school, I did my first year in New Orleans, which is why I love New Orleans, and then transferred to Brooklyn Law School here in New York. And New York has old money wealth. New York has levels of wealth that most people have never seen. Growing up in Miami, we are around rich people. Rich people are not necessarily wealthy people. Rich people, some of them are scammers. In Miami particularly, a lot of scamming. So you learn the aesthetics of like, you don't own that. That's a rent lease. This is nonsense. Versus when I went to law school and now my little working class self is in these buildings. I'm like, well, I didn't know a building could be so nice. This is interesting. I'm over here in my H&M suit. And then you have the partner at the firm walking down these gilded stairs in Tom Ford. You can immediately spot the difference. It's immediately uncomfortable. And particularly with Ashley, you see somebody who was thrust into the upper class, who was never treated like she was upper class. And it's hard to defend her, to be honest, because she says some foolishness. And it's hard to like have empathy for her. But taking her out of her, you see someone thrust into the upper class without any knowledge or any signifiers of like what she's supposed to do. Michael just led her to the wolves, which caused her consternation, which she caused a lot of consternation herself because she says color is foolishness. And with that, it is an interesting thing, and partially what I learned in law school is people of certain classes, particularly people that are upper middle class and upper class, they immediately know when you don't belong. And depending on if they want to be a jackass with you, they will immediately let you know that you don't belong. So many conversations where I had when I was in law school where people are having a regular conversation 1 minute, and next minute people are talking about Aspen. People are talking about going skiing, about this, that, and the next. I'm like, I don't know anything about that. What? I did get to go skiing on a field trip once in the 6th grade. They took us to North Carolina, and that was wild. So I'm like, oh yeah, the bunny slope, the one thing. They're like, oh no, but Aspen and this and Vail and blah, blah, blah. And the purpose of it is to weed out who belongs in their mind in the conversation and who doesn't. Because largely, when you have like these levels of classism, the higher the class of the person, because it's a hierarchy, they don't want other people to reach their level of wealth and of status. It's largely a status thing. If we lived in an actual meritocracy, these law firms, for example, would encourage, oh, you came from so-and-so, you worked your way into law school, you're smart enough, you deserve to be in this space, let me embrace you. They weed you out quick. First and foremost, if you are black and you didn't go to an Ivy League, they're like, oh, it's not good enough. I don't know about that. Mind you, if you're white and you didn't go to Ivy League, they let it go. Oh, I guess. Oh, you don't know about skiing this? I had a very kind and very smart and shrewd in the best way, mentor, right when I graduated, that she never told it to me, but I could tell, middle-aged black woman that grew up, I would say, very much Jack and Jill, so upper middle class. Very kind. She took me under her wing and she's like, Stephanie, you have the potential to be in these spaces, to be general counsel. So you have to stop being uncomfortable. And I was like, I'm wildly uncomfortable. Like people, and you can't say you're uncomfortable. It's like, you have to stop being uncomfortable. You need to go take golf lessons. I'll never forget this conversation. So you need to take golf lessons and you take skiing lessons because this is how in tennis and golf were the main ones. And she was like, I could take skiing in the off season. I don't know where she thought the money was going to come from. I was like, I don't get paid enough to do that. She's like, you need to do that, and that way you can network and the networking that matters and get into the C-suite because I see you there and I see this for you. And I was like, I don't see any of that. I was like, you're telling me to be successful in New York as a lawyer that works in tech, that we have agreed that I'm objectively, for what it's worth, good at my job. I'm smart, I'm capable, I'm people friendly. I need to go be a different person that I'm not. Like, I don't want to play tennis. I don't have any hand-eye coordination, to be honest. Not that I have anything against tennis. I know I'm not going to be good at it. So why are we going to waste money? I don't want to learn how to golf because it just looks boring. And skiing, the one time I got the opportunity to try it, I had a lot of fun. Also, I don't really like the cold. I was like, are there any other rich people hobbies that maybe I don't want to do those things? And largely when we don't talk about class, but we talk about how colorism elevates certain types of Black people, it sure does. Colorism sure let me into some of those spaces, for sure. I'm aware, and the classism will stop your ass right there. The classism will stop you right there and be like, oh, you don't have any pedigree. You don't have any learning. Girl, you're rough. You're very rough. And you look the part and you this, and mind you, back then, that's when my ends were fried, dyed, and flipped to the side. My hair was straightened every day. That was largely why I just stopped straightening my hair. I was like, oh my God. I think, yeah, the old video's still on there. The first video on the channel. If you ever watch the video about me and my best friend Shana talking about our natural hair, you see how fried the hair is. And that was when I finally was like, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to straighten my hair every day for these people. So I used to do a bait and switch and start the job 2 months in, 2 months straight hair. After the second month, just pop up curly. And people were like, what is this? I'm like, it's my hair. It grew out that way. And it's been wildly, like, very interesting. And largely when we don't acknowledge that we are never going to get to any type of liberation without dismantling classism. Because classism is the great equalizer. It is the great equalizer of Black people. Thank you, Niles. Classism will tell you, like, I went to a gala. So I used to go to all these free galas because free food. Hello. I'm not against the girls trying to get free food. I just want you to get free food in a healthy way. So speaking of the original live we did, and I used to go to like these galas for free because they had the extra tickets at the various places I worked at. And I was like, oh, I'll go. And I remember I went to this one gala. As somebody who is truthfully very much, if we're looking like 30 feet away, you're like, oh, so put together. Then once you get up close, you're like, okay, mostly put together, but like, I don't do my nails. Like, it depends on what day you catch me and depends on my level of care because I don't particularly care all the time. I remember the utter judgment of this one, she never spoke to me. I really want to speak to her. This other Black woman, there was only like 3 Black people at this gala. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, I saw her, like, you know, you do the smile, like, hey, sis. And she immediately was like, oh, no. It's giving working poor over here. Like, why do you have your bag on you from work? Why you look like this? Like, you're a bad representation, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't live in the city for me to put the bag down. What was I going to do? And it's really interesting to me. So I'm really glad that commenter brought up, like, yes, we need to talk about the colorism, texturism, the featurism. We need to talk about the classism as well, because the classism will come and the classism will look you in the face and look you up and down and be like, oh, no, I was going to let you sit here, but you're raggedy. You're raggedy and you cannot. And that, I think, is going to be equally as hard to dismantle as the colorism as well. They have to go hand in hand. And when we don't have these conversations, we kind of cement the idea that in America, we're classless. And I'm like, we are not classless. People have so much classism built into their body every day. So many things to work against. Exactly. Which is why, on my personal note, I was like, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I can't be bothered. Like, y'all run me my check so I can pay my rent. I can't be bothered. But there are people that do aspire to be in those spaces. And you know what? If they like it, I love it. I don't aspire for that for them. But if they want it, I do think people should have an equal shot. Because there are plenty talented Black people that are kept out of upper management of companies, for example, because they don't fit that certain upper class aesthetic. Like in tech, it's largely, what is the name of the vest? I'm forgetting. That ugly puffer vest that they always have on over the long sleeve. Like that is I am in the C-suite of this tech company and it is nonsense. And it is just like, well, this is ugly. So like, you have all this money, you have no fashion sense. Like, why are you wearing this? But if you don't have that, and you don't speak the right way, and you don't look the right way, and you also don't vacation in the same place, you're gonna get asked out. So I thought that was interesting. So let's pull up another comment. This was a common theme that I saw. Is it up there? Okay, it's up there. This was a common theme, and not this question. Not this, hey Lunalicious, we will do some Patagonia. Thank you, Niles. I was like, what's the ugly puffer there? It's ugly. Like, please. If you know somebody wearing Patagonia, please tell them to not. Tell them there are other things, other fashion choices for them. This comment I thought was spot on. And also this comment reflects a lot of the other comments. And it reflects what I said in the live, which was based off of Julesie's assertion that she made in a few other videos she did, which was largely as a Black community, when we covet things that other communities have, particularly when we're looking at relationships dynamics between white people. For example, we may not have insight into the interior lives of white women, which is why all that glitters and gold and we shouldn't put it on a pedestal. So a lot of the comments then in my live pushed back on that notion. We're like, no, white women are getting treated better in their marriage. I'm like, no, they are not. Now, if you're on my Patreon, you already know this. I did a video on this. When I was young and 19 years old, and she was curious, it's a longer story than what I'm about to say now. Guess who joined a white sorority? Me. I know plenty of white women. I don't know all of them to this day because I had to leave them, But I know plenty about white womanhood, which is why I say things matter of fact. Very matter of fact. And that's how I met Shayna. And that's the only reason why I did it, because there was two of us. It is a long story. However, I learned in terms of dynamics of white relationships, all that glitters is not gold. So let's get into Mallory's comment, and then we will talk about this. Yes, girl, it's a long... Trying to assimilate because people have told you that assimilation for one thing will get you jobs is a bad idea. I was going to leave that there. It's a very bad idea. So Mallory commented and stated, as someone who was adopted and raised in 98% white world from 1 through 18, I appreciate, Mallory said, this is my business and this is my truth. We need to stop idolizing what white people's marriages look like. I have only ever had close and intimate knowledge about marriage from white people and the way the institutions affect white women. All of my aunts are divorced. My mother was severely depressed for my entire life. We need to stop aspiring to the mythos of white womanhood. Yes, we do. Because when I tell you they fight, woo, because these white women are a huge difference in class. Oh, wait, I wrote, because these white women are miserable and their relationships with their husbands very infantilizing. This is a key part, the infantilization. Even when there isn't a huge difference in class. I could go off on a keynote's long tangent about it and the very toxic dynamics that result from the initial marital dynamic, but I will digress and just say it is not. Please do not aspire to have these types of relationships. These women are not respected as anything more than possessions, even from men that ain't got money to be possessing them. And that has largely been my experience, to which I wrote, this has largely been what I've seen happen sadly to the white married women I know as well. All that glitters is not gold in the least. Patriarchy comes for everyone behind closed doors. We really have to stop thinking. I know, again, because I had to leave them, because some of them were trifling. I only kept a few. Hasn't changed the fact I have been on the receiving end of seeing into many white women's marriages as well. And doesn't matter the complexion of the man, if they believe in patriarchy and they subscribe to patriarchy, problem is going to occur the minute the door closes. And the infantilization part is what literally I have seen in the white marriages I have observed as well. Which is, this is my wife. This is the person that I have because society told me that I need to purchase one, and I did, and she is smiling, and everything is fine, right? Everything is fine. Okay, don't worry about us. And it is commotion, particularly again, which is why I pulled the TikTok, so shout out to Chelsea for sending those to me, of the white stay-at-home moms specifically, because once you become a stay-at-home mom that has no income, it is X amount of times worse than the white women that actually work outside the home. Because once you don't have the income, now you have this person who infantilizes you at all times, who is hoarding their money or is very stingy with their money. You have very little control over things, and yet you have society being like, oh, everything is great over there. And it's not. So let me go through the comments really quick. I always forget to go through the comments as we do this. So hold on. Here, we'll take a second. Let's go. Okay. Are we going? How long have we been in? Oh, we've been on here a little bit. Okay. Okay, let's start at this. Let's start at this one. I went up too far. Hold on. Plenty women date white men expecting something better, but that is literally the source of OD patriarchy from Bobby. Yes, exactly. We have to rid ourselves of this notion that is automatically better. Yes, you can find a partner that is actively working through their internalized misogyny. Of course, I'm not saying that you can't find somebody like that. However, assuming that a specific race just doesn't subscribe to patriarchy, particularly the one that created this version of patriarchy, is foolishness. And there are a lot of people in those comments like, no, they're so much better off white women over there because less of them are working. When the point of the live was, when you don't have any money of your own, whether it's inherited or you worked for it or etc., you're putting yourself in a financially precarious situation. The working part is irrelevant, which is back to the main point of the live, which maybe I buried the lead and should have put in the beginning, which is, it's not that any of us, our deepest desire is not, wait, I have the quote in my head because I wrote it down. Our deepest desire is not a rich man. Our deepest desire is rest. Which I had wrote it out better than that, but that's what it is. And with people focusing so much on, oh, but statistically they're working less. Yes, they are working less, and statistically it is screwing them over, technically, if we're looking at the marriage aspect of it. Yes. White people are statistically more than likely to have one household incomes versus black people, where we usually have two household incomes because we live in a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, and we need two lower black incomes because we make less to support a house. Yes, that is true. And those one household incomes, unfortunately, sadly, have higher rates of financial abuse. All right, let's read some comments. I swear I'm gonna learn how to do this. I wonder if it's my phone. It just doesn't scroll. Nope, we're not. That's not it. That's it. Okay. Okay. Also, there were some comments semi-related to this, but kind of not, which was someone rightfully pointed out, which is that black women have always worked. So I find it very interesting, the podcast men, and then certain women that are like, I want a traditional marriage. A traditional black marriage is labor up in this place. Rightfully or wrongfully, it's labor. We have always worked since we got drug over here. It's labor to all the various countries. So I think that is interesting, and also removing the idea that, again, maybe we should push back on our work culture in the United States. Our work culture is toxic, which I think during the pandemic, we all were pushing back on our work culture. And now, largely, we have all been like, okay, I guess they're dragging me into the office, I'm going to the office. And I'm saying the office, but what's interesting now is we are having these conversations, and working class people, particularly if you were, what did they designate people? The people in the supermarket, anybody that worked in delivery, they required all those people to work. So they never let any of them work from home. That never occurred, which I don't know why. Necessity. what is the word? Everybody in medical, all of those people work this whole time. So I do essential. Thank you, Ebony. I was like, what is the word? None of the essential workers have ever gotten to have the break that largely, I'm saying we because I did like a little income poll on the Instagram, so I know largely like where we fall on this, that we, the corporate workers, have had. So I do think a holistic change of how we work in general will fix the majority of the problems that people are bringing up. Which brings me to the last comment that I wanted to talk about. Which was, I have no idea how we get here, but I thought this comment was very interesting in terms of who looks at class or who is immediately aware of what class they are and who's not. Oh, am I in the way? I can't even move me. Okay. Oh, that's not gonna help. All right, let's see. Indigo Girl. Great video. I enjoyed listening. And this is the important part too, my head is blocking out. Oh, well. Socioeconomic political class, I think she said, has always been interesting to me, if I remember from when I was reading it. Being a Black woman growing up in the white suburbs, it took me until my 30s, I think, to realize this society was not meant for me to succeed. So there's a section in there, and my head is covering it, so I can't see it, where she stated because she grew up in the white suburbs, she was largely not aware that she was middle class. I had my head in the clouds in my 20s, now in my 30s, I got my head on a swivel. I wish more Black women were aware of where they fall in the socioeconomic structure. Women need to understand where they are and what they want to be and how to get there. Financial literacy is key, and I agree. Financial literacy. Hypergamy never appealed to me. Anna is like a fairy tale, just like all those Disney movies. We are seeing a lost generation. They may not want to work like us millennials. In the comparison of the original live on YouTube, I was talking about Gen Z and how the Gen Z girlies have watched We the Millennials girl boss ourselves into just sadness, depression, and overwork, which is why they're like, oh, I'm not doing that. We are seeing a lost generation. They may not want to work like us millennials, but someone has to do the work to keep the economy going. I believe the next decade is going to be very disastrous or very profitable for a lot of people. There will be a lot of middle class people who will move down to be working poor, and there will be a small percentage of middle class who will move up to upper middle class. I'm busting my tail to move into the upper middle class. It's not going to be easy, but life is going to get hard for people who cannot keep up. I'm happy I chose a career that was worth the money I invested. And Rebecca said, I'm hoping, maybe too much, that we can reimagine ways of sustainable work, not only for our overworked millennial selves, but also the next generation. I don't think, I cannot see, I don't know, I can't say it. I don't know what it looks like, but I've been trying to give it some thought. So I think when we have this particular conversation, that's what I'm going to try. It's also necessary to discuss how difficult it is to build a family and maintain your career, especially if you don't have a strong support system or the finances to pay for it. Yes, which we'll talk about that in 1 second. And then BK Dime Piece, that describes Gen X to a T, working all the time. Exactly. So this comment I really appreciated for the vulnerability and the honesty of the comment. And a few parts that I thought were really interesting is if you grow up solely, because I have friends, I would say on the spectrums of working poor, working class, and barely middle class. I know a few rich people. I wouldn't say we're friends. I know them though, because I've worked with them. So with that, I always find it really interesting, particularly when we're talking about Black middle class people who grew up in predominantly white suburbs, who is allowed to be aware of their class and who is spared, who is forced to be aware of their class is a better way of putting it, and who is spared from classism. Who is essentially spared from the burden of knowing what class you're in all the time. And it is largely, if you are a little bit over the precarious slump of middle class, you don't necessarily think about class when you're a kid. There's no reason to think about it. You're like, okay, I asked if we could do this. We're going to do it or we're not going to do it. When you are working class or working poor, nobody has to tell you that. You see it. You see it. The first time you see it largely is when you go to school and somebody has X amount of X shoes that you asked for and you were told you couldn't have them, you couldn't afford them. It's the first time you're like, why can't we afford them? What are you doing, parent? that they're not doing? Or what are you not doing that they're doing that they can have these shoes and I can have these shoes? And wait, why is our house look like this? And I went over so-and-so's house and their house looks different than mine. And it turns into this whole thing versus if you have the money and you live in a suburban area, the suburb is cookie cutter. Everything looks the same. You will never notice at a young age that you are middle class or anything is wrong because everything is the same. Everything is calm. Everything is hopefully okay. That doesn't spare you the traumas of being a black person, probably the only black kid in that whole neighborhood. She did say predominantly white. That doesn't spare you from when you go to school, people treat you a fool, and then you have to learn, like, wait, we live in the same neighborhood and you're acting crazy with me? Oh, it's because I'm black? Like, oh, that's interesting. This is raggedy behavior. It doesn't spare you from any of that. And I think largely the idea that as our society continues in late stage capitalism, it's running now. People have gone from hustle culture, hustle. We all celebrated it. Why? I have no idea. It's very strange. I was talking to my best friend Shayna yesterday about the live I did and about that we're doing this one. And particularly I was telling her that I shared the story that when we were in Miami of what happened with the young girl. And I was telling her, I was like, oh, I'm really proud of myself. The one thing I'm really proud of myself post-corporate for me has nothing to do with finances and everything to do with how I feel, which is finally letting go of the idea that I have to live up to the, depending on how you look at it, stereotype that Jamaicans have 3 jobs. So if you live in New York or Miami, there are huge populations of Jamaican people. And one of the stereotypes of Jamaicans is that Jamaicans have 3 jobs. And when Shayna and I were in college, she used to joke with me about this all the time. She's Black American. And I used to be so proud of it. I was like, oh, I have 3 jobs. I literally had 3 jobs in college at one time. Like a fool at one time. And still had debt. Wild. When we graduated and I went to law school, always had a job. When I worked in corporate, I was like, I have a job. I have this. I have that. I have all work. I was so proud of it. I was like, nobody can ever tell me that they're outworking me. I have earned everything. Labor. And what did it get me? Nothing. It got me so much stress. And Bajans in Trinidad said, listen, Caribbean people, no, I say this, and I've joked about this before, nobody loves labor more than immigrants. Nobody loves labor more than immigrants because the lie of meritocracy cannot make sense as an immigrant unless you participate in the fact that you're going to do all this damn work. You're going to do all this work because you believe in the lie of meritocracy and you're like, it's going to pay off because they told me that I left behind my good mango tree, so it has to pay off. So we con ourselves into thinking like, I'm going to have 3 jobs and it's going to work out, and it don't ever work out. My dad is a great example. My dad sadly gave all his time, his energy, 60 hours a week, 12-hour days, doing manual labor for another 18-wheeler to smack his 18-wheeler and end his career in an instant. And thank God he's okay. But that really put into perspective for me. I was like, I'm not doing all this. What did I get for it? All this debt? I've gotten some things, but was it worth it? No, it wasn't. And so I was telling her, I was like, I'm so proud that I have been like working through that and have left it behind. Hey, Shannon. This is one of my dear friends. And left it behind because now, from a privileged place, I've saved up a lot of money. I can dictate my own hours. I can say like, oh yeah, we're going to do the live this time. I'm a little late sometimes. I was on time this week. We're going to do the live. We're going to do this. I'm going to film this. I'm going to keep up with Patreon. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do it in a sustainable way. And largely what I think initial reaction to, okay, I'm not going to get a rich man. I'm going to work my way into financial freedom. Or we could figure out how to make this system that literally benefits the few work for more of us. I don't think that that's any type of easy thing. I don't think that that's any type of quick fix. I don't think that's immediate. I don't even know if that would happen in the next decade. But the pandemic did show me that it is possible when large swaths of people start saying, no, I'm not doing that. Not today. Nope. You see also, speaking of working class, you see the re-rise in the U.S. of unions, starting with the Amazon union, where people are starting to unionize and say, hey, I deserve basic rights. I deserve sick days. You see what's happening now with the railway workers when Biden and all the Democrats, majority of them, I had a list, I posted it. I remember the majority of them forced all the railway workers to sign that collective bargaining agreement, which was trifling, which did not guarantee them simply the sick days they were asking for. What's happening now? Shit is derailing, blowing up. This is not sustainable. Late stage capitalism is not sustainable. And while the reaction might be, hey, let's just do so much work. I'm just going to work my way out of this. Your body can literally only take so much. Your mental state can only take so much. And you shouldn't have to do all of those things. So it's something that I think we can go back. A lot of reflection, BK Diamond Piece, a lot of reflection during COVID. Go back to that COVID reflection of like, okay, when we all got locked in the house for 6, 7, depending on where you lived, a year, and we thought of all these new, different, imaginative ways to live a life. Depending on what you believe, you only get one iteration of this life. We would kind of owe it for ourselves, that. And then they voted for that guy that deregulated freight. Listen, did y'all see Amanda Seale's post about how they, the residents of East Palestine, welcome Donald Trump? And it's like, y'all are not okay. Y'all have Stockholm Syndrome, but someone really needs to talk to poor working class white people. It's not going to be me, but someone really needs to talk to them because their level of Stockholm Syndrome is very wild. It's very wild, but I don't have the time or capacity for them or that. So we'll go focus on this. But I think it's really interesting, particularly the comments, and I would say the comments are mild, really, in the live that we did on Prenups and Patriarchy, in that we still haven't really gotten the plot. I think we're still, a lot of us are getting it, but we're still like not going all the way, which is, there are some comments in there of people being like, well, I got flown to Vegas and it was fine, but I made sure I had money. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. But we should probably talk about how all of these patriarchal systems are causing havoc. A good example of this, which I don't have it anymore. I had it for years. The heater is making weird noise. I had it for years. Because to me, I thought it was ironic, so I just never took it off. When I was a freshman, like every other freshman, I hope they stop doing this because honestly, it's rude. It's rude and it's disrespectful. But when I was a freshman in college, they used to give out rape whistles your freshman year. They just hand it to you. They're like, here you go. It's a rape whistle. And they would just say it so just matter of fact. And so it sat on my keychain all these years. The amount of things that we tell young girls and women in general to do to protect themselves, but then don't say anything to young boys, young men, and grown adult men is wild to me. You receive a rape whistle when you're 18. You get told to watch your drink. You get told not to wear the short dress. Don't wear the short skirt. Okay, if you're going to show your assets, only pick one to show off. You need to, don't be out at night. Don't be walking to yourself. Don't even think to walk to the restaurant bathroom by yourself. The list is so long and so wild that in some of the comments, people were like, oh, that's really sad what happened to the young woman in Miami in the story I told, but we need to be smarter. You could be smart as all hell. At a certain point, you're going to be tired. You can't be constantly having to think of all these situations. Like, okay, I am apparently a CIA operative now. I have so much knowledge in my head on how to defend myself from men versus, okay, can y'all just go talk to the men? I'm tired. I was supposed to learn Taekwondo. I don't know Taekwondo. Do all these things, self-defense class. I remember in self-defense classes were all the rage on college campuses. I was like, y'all are telling us, which I think is a good skill to have anyway, but why are you targeting all the girls telling us we need to go to self-defense class instead of telling the boys to be respectful and take the no and walk away? I'm confused. And so at a certain point, I do think we have to, and I guess the line that I'm trying to thread when we have these conversations is, I don't want to instill fear like into other young women. That's not the goal. Like, I want you to have the best time. Don't let anybody record anything. But I want you to have the best time of your freaking life. I had a time in college. I had a great freaking time. Excellent. And largely, I was in spaces that were very safe with people that made me feel safe, where I was like, oh, I'm going to be all right. Like, me and Shayna used to be out 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. But I know there's 2 of us. There's somebody else. Like, okay, we're safe. We're fine. Have a good time instead of what is the line of telling girls like, okay, you have to be aware, but also, girl, you deserve to have a good time too. Because the boys are having a great time. They're having a great time. They're shaking their ass. They're showing their ass. They're doing all the things. All the things. The amount of mooning college boys do, surprising. Just randomly. Maybe it's a Florida thing. I don't know. Just randomly. Just butts out. If you like it, I love it. Sure. I mean, don't get arrested. I don't know. But we have to figure out how to tell the young girls, like, hey, you have to be aware of a predator, but also focus the energy on the predators. So hopefully the live did that. But that's something that I think about as well. Because I'm like, fear-mongering, that's right. I'm like, fear-mongering doesn't help. Fear-mongering doesn't help anyone. So, listen, I don't know. I'm telling you, listen, University of Central Florida, a time to be alive. A time to be alive. I was like, oh, I was not expecting that on my Tuesday night wine drinking in the plaza. Why we were drinking wine in a plaza, beyond me. Time was had. You could be giving Albert Einstein and still get harmed, like the math ain't mathing. Exactly. Because it pushes back against that notion where people are like, you need to wear X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, nah, that's not correct. Because as somebody who grew up in Miami, where people are largely not wearing a lot of clothes because it's hot as shit, the rates are not particularly higher. Which, I'll end on this one note. I meant to take a screenshot of her Instagram to put it up so y'all could follow her. The Collectress is great, excellent Instagram. And essentially what she covers is the intersections of all of the isms. Classism, colonialism, imperialism, racism, sexism, specifically in the hospitality industry. And it's really interesting, as somebody who's, maybe I worked hospitality adjacent, I worked in a movie theater like when I was in high school, so maybe that one counts. It's interesting to see how we view hospitality and how hospitality largely, sometimes sadly, is a vehicle for harm, specifically towards women. And some of the things that I took for granted as like, oh, of course you know that. Of course you walk around with Vex money. Everyone has Vex money. Like, of course. That I took for granted as common sense and that I learned are not being taught to everyone when I moved to New York are due to a very specific upbringing of growing up in what I would term like a pleasure city. So on the Collectress, on her page, she has designated that hospitality are places of pleasure. You know, going to eat is a pleasurable experience, etc. Going to a club, going to a bar, etc. And if you have certain cities that are built on pleasure and hospitality, so I would say in the U.S., cities that are solely built on that, you have Miami, New Orleans, Vegas, are solely built on like the pleasure of other people. Miami has no industry. Miami has crime, scamming is crime, and hospitality. And largely when you grow up in those places, you see a lot of things that you shouldn't see as a kid because it's a mess. But you start to see how people maneuver when they think that they are on vacation, so they are entitled to other people. You see what happens when people fetishize and sexualize whole groups of people because they've come to this place to receive pleasure. They've come to this place to relax themselves. They've come to this place to see what they deem as aesthetically pleasing, and said aesthetically pleasing person needs to do what they want to do. And that has been like kind of interesting to go through her page. And honestly, I would say her work is so detailed and so methodically done. I have to watch it a few different times so that way I understand. But it's really great. I highly recommend watching that because that dovetails a lot into like the classism issues and the issues we see particularly in interclass partnering dynamics, which it cannot be said enough times that these things are happening few and far between. They're happening few and far between, but people's desire to marry up, quote unquote, is growing because people need rest. Because people need rest and they're tired. So their desire to do it now because of the internet is higher, but the actuality of this actually happening is few and far between. The Ashley Darby's, few and far between. But the actuality of you getting flown out and a commotion happening to you, that's much higher. That's much easier. It's much easier for someone to buy you a plane ticket, fly you out and do commotion and hope that you don't say anything. A good show, which it's not real, but great show, highly recommend, is Rap Shit by Issa Rae. It's based in Miami. Super excited when it came out because you rarely ever see Black Miami. I would say it's really realistic. It's very realistic in terms of what happens when you live in a space and or you participate in these type of dynamics. So one of the main characters, I won't like spoil it for you, but she has someone fly her to New York. She has never been to New York. Commotion happens, and it's an older white man. And that dynamic is a little bit, the lines are a little bit blurry as she is participating in like digital sex work, but she doesn't consent to actual any touching or anything. So I highly recommend that episode as well. Because I found that to be really very realistic in terms of like, how does this actually play out? And particularly because the man was a wealthier white man that lived in New York, he largely did what he wanted to do, moved around and treated her as if she was disposable. And essentially, and I think the underlying part of these conversations is these wealthier people that, you know, maybe they will fly you out and maybe they will do this and maybe you'll be fine that one time, maybe it won't be. They have the funds to pay for a lawyer to make you sign documents. They have the funds for all these things to make any type of issue caused by their behavior to largely go away. And that is a dangerous part. So on that note, I appreciate y'all. Let me read through these comments. The collectress. So like collect and then Tress, like Tress. I'll post her in my stories so that way y'all can see it. Excellent show. The sex tourism is wild. Exactly. And I think largely people don't view being flued out as sex tourism because they think that they're going to be the tourist. It's like, no, girl, you're not. You are a part of that person's vacation unknowingly. Unknowingly. They have added you to their itinerary of foolishness. So I hope moving forward, you know, we'll continue to have these conversations. I think it's like interesting and like timely, necessary. And I would say like on a personal note for me, since I have my two little sisters, I've been trying to figure out how to have these conversations with them in a way that doesn't fearmonger and put unnecessary fear into them, but that they're aware, you know? So yes, so true. That's why I don't agree with this narrative that a man loves you when he throws money at you. Exactly. Some men do that for sport. And I think that is the biggest thing. That I think maybe sometimes people haven't been exposed to people that just do it for shits and giggles. A good way, to be honest, if you are interested, go to the strip club and see how people behave in a strip club. Miami has a huge strip club culture. So I've been going since I was 18. So I was like, oh, people have money to trick off. The saying, it ain't tricking if you got it, it's a thing. They're like, it's Wednesday night. I want to spend a rack. I spent my rack. And they go about their business. And assigning emotions to somebody just going about their business is what causes the problem. Because now you're more likely to get preyed on. So, on that note, it's Friday. I appreciate y'all. I hope you'll have a lovely weekend. We are going to the student loan. SCOTUS is looking at student loans on Tuesday, oral arguments. So my goal is to watch all of it and then do a video. So let's see. Maybe we can do the video at the end of the night. But on that note, everyone deserves rest and safety. So I think the more we push for rest and safety, the more we can have those things for everybody involved. Because that's really, I think, the desire, to be honest. And because I messed up my line that I had so beautifully crafted, I'm just going to say it again. Oh, that our deepest desire is rest, not rich men. Truly. So I hope you'll have a restful day and a restful weekend. It's going to be blizzarding in random places across the U.S., so stay safe. Don't go outside in a blizzard. It's uncomfortable and not fun if it doesn't usually snow where you are. And yeah, Google is your friend on how to get through a blizzard. So appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful weekend, Beyonce. Bye. Thank you.